Throughout the history of the Overwatch League, we've seen many legendary stories unfold. So many players have built a forever-lasting legacy in this league, regardless of how much they ended up accomplishing. A lot of these guys we grew to love, and we'll defend them until the end of time if necessary, and we'll never hesitate to say how much we miss them, even to this day. And what's crazy is a lot of people we talk about had relatively short careers. Quite a few popular players throughout the league's history had just that 1 year of glory. They peaked incredibly fast in their first year while rising to legendary status, then either got benched, became washed, or ran into some kind of unfortunate circumstance. A shorter, more common way to refer to this kind of player is a one-season wonder. Believe it or not, but there's a ton of players that could receive this kind of label, which got me thinking, what would be a conclusive top 10? After really taking some time to think about it, I came up with my answer. Today I present to you my top 10 one-season wonders in Overwatch League history. Starting off at number 10, I have Erster. I think we can all agree that Erster was a very exciting player in his rookie year as part of the Atlanta Reign. From GOATs to Mei Genji to Doom Hanzo, there wasn't a single thing that Erster couldn't do well. He was the staple to the Reign's success. He was a common consensus top-tier flex DPS in the league. It seemed like he could flex onto literally anything in the game and practically be elite. Atlanta's dominance and playoff victory even had him as the obvious leader. I mean, he even scared the eventual 2019 champs. Erster made a ton of big plays and was a rising star in this league, and there wasn't a single player on his role that he was afraid of or couldn't keep up with. Erster had such a bright future ahead of him. With being so young and the Reign still in a position to improve, he was expected to be a star player for years to come. But right as his career was starting to take off, things around him started to change. As 2020 progressed, he found himself on the bench more and more often. His play, it just wasn't the same as it once was, and it was obvious both him and the coaching were not seeing eye to eye. Erster couldn't see the light of day, even in a hard Genji meta, for crying out loud. All that potential, all that meaningful progress 1 year prior was gone just like that. The Reign had a disappointing 2020, and so did Erster. And sadly, his career never recovered after this, and he has yet to play another game in the league since. The man was literally a superstar for 1 year and then vanished into thin air. This guy could have been a staple in our league for years. It's crazy how sometimes things just don't go your way, huh? At number 9, we have a bit of a weirder one. The one and only Western player to represent this list. It's FD-God. FD-God's appearance is a little different. He's not the typical definition of like your 1 year wonder where he kind of just disappears afterward. With FD-God, it's more so failing to deliver consistently while having enormous expectations. His career started off perfectly fine. His rising stock from the World Cup led to an immediate starting role on the Paris Eternal, and almost immediately, you could see why the Eternal were so high on him. In a Lucio meta, this guy was a game changer. He was basically what Lee Jae-gon was over in APAC. His confidence, his playmaking ability on Lucio, it just gave Paris a major boost at a position you usually don't get it from. FD-God played risky and aggressively, and it often paid off. I mean, he took over control maps. Lijiang Tower was his. Even elite teams in big tournament matches could not keep him under wraps. FD-God wasn't just a star. He was a top player at the main support role. I mean, honestly, his play on Lucio and even Brig was pretty brilliant. So when the time came for the Paris Eternal to move on to their budget roster and for the Shock to get their hands on a new main support in 2021, this felt like a pretty unfair pickup, but also a match made in heaven. You lose Moth, but pick up another top player at the same role. With his aggressive nature, it seemed like the Shock's Brawl comp would be even scarier on paper. But in reality, it had the opposite effect. He pretty much always struggled to gel with Violet outside of those Lucio metas. Their style of play was too similar to work, and FD-God found himself struggling outside of Lucio. It even got to the point where San Fran thought they had a better chance of winning with Violet on main support instead. FD-God literally got hard benched until the start of the playoffs. Compared to 2020, the regression was so incredibly significant. People had such high expectations when he moved to a championship caliber team like San Fran, but he just couldn't deliver. And needless to say, the Shock went ahead and got rid of him the moment the year ended. and since then, he's still looking to make it back into the league. Now, if the rumors are true, maybe that'll change very soon, but as of right now, he is absolutely a one-season wonder. Number 8. Effect. When thinking of the biggest what-ifs of all time, Effect often tops the list. Effect was sensational for the Dallas Fuel during the inaugural season. Individually, he could keep pace with just about any DPS in the league. His mechanics, his game sense, they were pure, and his work ethic was unmatched. His desire to win was absolutely the strongest in the entire league. In spite of his best efforts to be a superstar player for the Dallas Fuel, Dallas were just a bad team. It didn't really matter what Effect could do in game. He could put up masterclass performances on Tracer and other heroes and still get 4-0'd. You couldn't help but feel bad for the guy, you know? But at the very least, he did show why he was one of the elite players of the league. Under better circumstances, he'd be competing in the playoffs and making a difference. But on the bright side, with his skill level and maybe some time off to recuperate, Dallas fans had hope that he could maybe come back stronger for 2019 and actually lead them to the playoffs this time. With a better team around him, the Fuel could on paper be a scary roster. But unfortunately, Effect burned himself out beyond repair in 2018. The long hours of rigorous training plus other emotional struggles were too much to bear. Effect burned himself out way too much. He just couldn't play the game the same way anymore. It wasn't fun for him. So within a few months of 2019, Effect retired. Effect possessed so much potential, and yet all we got was a single year of this level of play when it really did not make a difference. Effect played so well against so many good players under better circumstances. It's a huge signal that shows you that under better circumstances, if he played on a different team, he probably would have won a lot of games. If he had chosen to sign elsewhere, I think things probably could have been different. But the harsh reality is, luck was not on Effect's side because he chose to sign with a cursed team like Dallas, leading to one of the most interesting one-season wonders that we'll ever see. Number 7. Ons. Probably a weird entry to have on here, I admit it. He technically was a part of 3 different seasons, so he did have a decently long career, but the thing is, only one of those years was an entire season. After 2020, he retired, came back midway through Season 4 in a less significant role, and then an even less significant role in Season 5, where his playtime disappeared completely by the summer. We only got 1 real year of Ons getting significant playtime in the prime of his career, which is an absolute shame because, you know, he was a god. He came in as this unknown player and left as probably the worst kept secret of all time. We didn't even know his name beforehand, but we all sure as hell knew after he got his hands on that Widowmaker, now didn't we? In all my years of watching OWL and pro Overwatch in general, I've never seen someone more dominant than Ons on Widow, which is what honestly makes his short career so sad. Arguably the league's greatest Widowmaker player of all time played 1 full season. Ons had one of the highest peaks as a hitscan player, and he made a team of champions that were already extremely good, even better than they once were. To make that kind of difference on arguably the league's one and only dynasty, in Overwatch esports in general for that matter, but only have 1 full year of gameplay to back it up is absurd. People don't realize that Ons is being held on a pedestal for what he did. A champion and an all-time great sniper struggled to not just maintain interest in the game, but also a full-time role over the next 2 years. Crazy. Moving into number 6, I have Ding. Ding met some unfortunate circumstances within his career. It started off great. His future seemed quite bright. But then it suddenly just got taken away from him after 1 year. For those who aren't aware, Ding came in as part of the Dragons' new core in 2019, with the goal being to right the wrongs of the 0-40 season. Needless to say, the Dragons accomplished this goal, and one guy that largely made it possible was Ding. He kind of became a legend in Shanghai lore for what he did. For starters, he was the guy that really sealed the deal for them and got Shanghai that first win in OWL history. His Sombra play was the thing that opened it all up. But it doesn't stop there, as Ding Sombra was a pioneer in making a meta shift happen during the GOATS era. The Dragons were arguably the first team to consistently run the Sombra GOATS variant of the comp and be successful with it, and on top of that, actually beat some of these hardcore, amazing GOATS teams consistently with DPS comps. The evidence is right there in front of you based off of their Stage 3 title run. That was it. That was what they were playing, and it worked brilliantly. And at the center of attention was usually Ding. His Sombra caught eyes for sure, of course, but I think it's the Pharah that people truly remember. He consistently ran it no matter what the opposition was playing, and it worked brilliantly. Ding's Pharah was a game changer. If you took your eyes off of him for 1 second to focus on like Diem or Gamsu, you were dead. That was it. And when it really mattered in that Stage 3 finals against the San Francisco Shock, he put out one of the greatest performances by a single player of all time en route to being the MVP of that match in Shanghai's first tournament title in franchise history. Ding had a crazy match to cement both his legacy as well as the Dragons at the start. And I really do think it's one of the greatest individual tournament performances I've ever seen, and I highly recommend checking it out if you haven't before. Ding was a rising star, and clearly the backbone of Shanghai, and the league gave him recognition for this with a Roll Star Award. Ding was present and very important for just about every aspect of the Dragons' turnaround year. He was a legitimate household name, but yet, just a couple of months later, the Dragons replaced him with Fleta. Now, it's an understandable upgrade, it's Fleta, but it's still one that did mark the end of Ding's career. He pretty much rode the bench for the rest of his time there and was out of the league for good by the end of 2020. For a guy who did so much and made such historic contributions, that is pretty wild. This guy not only helped the Dragons cement their own legacy, but he took down the Shock for crying out loud. It felt like he could have built something greater, it really does. But alas, it just wasn't meant to be. Starting off the top 5 is Krong. A sad realization to come to here for sure, as 2020 Krong is unforgettable. We're talking a historic rookie season and generational start to a career on the Guangzhou Charge. He came into a good, but not great Charge team, and became their X Factor, their missing piece. That's the kind of intangibles that he brought to the table. His skill, his consistency, that ability to take space. It was perfect. And once the Charge got into a groove around summer of 2020, Krong elevated himself into the MVP conversation thanks to his unreal Sigma play. It got to a point where he was probably one of the best off-tank players in the world, and arguably the league's #1 Sigma. The Summer Showdown run and upset over Shanghai is not possible without Krong. He was the catalyst behind that run. He is the one that gave the Dragons the most problems thanks to the space he was taking, and the pressure he was applying, and all the general correct decisions and little things that he did in his gameplay. It takes a special kind of player to outplay somebody of Void's caliber, and generally give Shanghai, a prime Shanghai mind you, a lot of problems. Krong was that guy, and the league took notice, even giving him a Roll Star Award along with that MVP nomination. Krong did something truly special in 2020. It's unfortunate that he never quite had the same level of help after this, cause that's kind of what sparkled his downfall in the end. Krong played 3 seasons, and yet, when we look back at it, year 1 is the only time that we truly remember him. He was pretty much set up for failure because the Charge were so terrible. His final 2 years were nothing compared to his explosion onto the scene. As time went on, he lost his motivation and only got worse as he became more of a background player on this team. And as the ultimate slap in the face, last year, the Charge replaced him with Piggy mid-season while making a comeback, who pretty much has the exact same hero pool. To be a top 3 off-tank in the game and an MVP candidate, then never have a real chance to follow that up and then get replaced is sad, and ultimately why he makes the cut. At the number 4 spot, I'm going with Exy. A pretty self-explanatory one, and probably the best recent example we have. Exy had as good of a start to a career as anybody that we've seen on the Paris Eternal in 2020. A quick rise to stardom, a pivotal contributor to a tournament title, and an excellent season, and an MVP candidate. You really can't ask for much more. In a matter of weeks, Exy could already consistently match the best players at his position. When you can keep pace with and even outplay a prime Carpe Anons, you're playing at a ridiculous level. Exy played with such amazing consistency, both before his Element Mystic teammates came of age, and after. He always kept a place in the spotlight no matter what, thanks to his uncanny playmaking on Cass, Ashe, Hanzo, Widow, and even Soldier. As great as Sparkle and Hanbin were, Exy was clearly the glue. people talked about him just as much. I mean, literally right from week 1, we could feel the hype from this guy. We could feel his skill as he was trying to prove to the rest of the world that he is worth taking seriously. He'd felt like a top player in the league very early, and that never went away. Even after taking a break for health reasons, he returned to form almost immediately. Had he played the entire season that year, he very well could have won the MVP award and/or Role Star honors. Exe was very fun to watch. Flashy, really good mechanically, and absurdly clutch. In just about every major game that Paris played, he was usually doing something big to give his team the advantage. He's probably one of the highest skilled and clutch rookies in league history. And yet, his first year marked the downfall of his career. Before 2021 could begin, he chose to leave behind an exciting opportunity with the Dallas Fuel to permanently solve his health issues, and by the time he was ready to make his return the following year, teams were losing interest. He did eventually get to resume his career on the Florida Mayhem, but it was pretty short-lived, cause when it was all said and done, Hydron outplayed him for the starting job, leading to very little playtime after the first few months. When the team favors a rookie over somebody of Exe's stature like this, that's a pretty big statement on how far he fell compared to his former glory. And after the playoffs, Exe's interest in Overwatch had completely vanished as he retired to pursue professional Valorant. And considering the little playtime and the notable drop-off compared to his peak, Exe has to be one of the biggest what-ifs and one-season wonders in OWL history. Kicking off the top 3 is one of the most popular players even to this day. It's Bumper. Bumper is quite the anomaly. His meteoric rise to stardom in the Overwatch League is a story that is still talked about to this day. So many people are still waiting for Bumper's return, even though it's unlikely, and wish that anybody would give him a chance. And keep in mind, he's been out of the league for almost 5 years now. That is the kind of influence Bumper had within this community. Bumper is unlike anything we've ever seen in the league. He is a very unique example of a career that nobody before or after has replicated. Bumper is one of the most popular and influential figures of all time for his aggressive, unconventional playstyle and cocky attitude. This is what made Bumper so special. It made him, him. He was one of the most memorable players on a memorable team. People loved how confident the Titans were, and Bumper was one of the leaders who made them this way. So many people gravitated to Bumper back then. It seemed so ridiculous to play so recklessly, but still beat some of the other all-time great rosters out there. It almost felt wrong to watch him succeed and, if not play better at times than people like Mono and Super, who generally just played the game in a more intelligent and traditional way. But that's what made Bumper so fun. We all know that he's very lucky to have had such amazing teammates to not only keep him protected, but pick up the slack when he was doing something silly. But nobody cared, that's the thing. Bumper was so damn unpredictable and fun to watch. Some of the stuff that he was going for reminded you of what you'd see in your ranked games. Ridiculous flank shatters, whiffing shatters and just throwing them out left and right because he could. Hard feeding, and just playing like a lunatic. Add in the random times where he'd play DPS, and he stuck out like a sore thumb. He consistently did things that nobody else would dare go for at his position. Bumper did not care. He was there to do him and have some fun. And what's great is that a lot of the time, it was working. Bumper was a plat player's dream represented in the Overwatch League. Bumper was somebody the audience couldn't help but feel drawn towards. He was that guy that everybody was talking about, regardless of if you liked the Titans or not. To play that crazy and still play well is something that I still don't understand to this day. However, ultimately it might have been the thing that costed him, because that carefree mindset quickly turned into attitude issues. Before the season was even over, it felt like the Bumper era was already done, because during the playoffs, Bumper was permabenched for TZ and would never see the Overwatch League stage ever again. At the conclusion of 2019, Bumper was kicked off the Titans and his career was over. He has not been back in the league since, and he probably won't ever be back. It's rare to see this kind of fall off in a player. To go from one of the most popular guys in the world to permanently out of the league one season later is a bizarre turn of events. In a way, it's kind of his own fault. but sometimes I wonder if Bumper's departure was the true beginning of the end for the runaway era in Vancouver. It doesn't feel like a coincidence to me. It's like Bumper was the soul of that team, and by getting rid of the soul, there was just no way they could exist. Bumper's career is one of the most interesting, but also most short-lived. It's something that was exciting, but just couldn't exist long-term. What a shame. At number 2, I'm going with another popular tank from the old days. This time it's Fissure. Fissure might have one of the most bizarre up-and-down careers of all time. It started off not so great when he found himself benched on London, so naturally, he requested a trade and found himself in unfamiliar territory on a mixed roster in LA. But even so, he rose up to the challenge and found a way to be better. Fissure got so good and carried the Gladiators so hard that many people thought of him as the best tank in the game. He turned the Glads from a mediocre bottom feeder into a real contender. His Winston was unmatched. His team fully invested in him, and he made the most of it with some unreal hard carries. He gets a lot of credit in helping turn that Glads team around and getting them to win as many games as they did. Winning 21 of your last 30 matches after that really mediocre start is ridiculous. The man was elite. His primal rage mechanics are still some of the best to this day, and he possesses some of the most memorable highlights on Winston ever. The number of times that he kept his team in matches by sheer willpower alone makes him the biggest carry at main tank we've ever known. What I like is he not only played better himself, but he found ways to elevate his teammates as well and motivate them to improve. Fissure was seriously fun to watch, and it's not just because he was the best tank player. I think it also has to do with his story. A team of London's caliber was so willing to throw him away to the streets, and that put a serious chip on his shoulder. That trade ended up being the fuel that pushed him past his limits. The man wanted to win and prove London wrong, and at just about every step of the way, he did. It was glorious to witness that rage and motivation play out in real time as the Glads were winning game after game, and the fact that they never lost to London when Fissure was their starter is crazy. Never has a trade worked out so well for a single franchise before. There's very few individuals out there in the history of this league to contribute as much to a franchise as Fissure did with the Gladiators. It's just unfortunate that he couldn't have that storybook ending that you're looking for with this type of thing. He was really good, but also did not quite see eye to eye with management, which eventually led to his benching and falling out with the Gladiators. With his skill, we all assumed that he'd bounce back no problem on a new team. But unfortunately, Season 1 is not only where Fissure would peak, but it'd also be the only time where he played a full season before retirement. Soul seemed like a perfect fit in 2019, and to be fair, it started off pretty well. But before long, he got benched for Marvel and showed a pretty clear-cut lack of interest in the game, leading to a mid-season retirement. Now in defense of Fissure, he did try to make a comeback the following year, and in the few games he played with the Vancouver Titans, he looked perfectly fine. But he only lasted 4 matches before Vancouver completely imploded. Fissure stuck around the scene for 3 whole years, but it only felt like we got 1. It's that instability that makes him a one-season wonder here. He always had the skill, that was never a problem. He simply couldn't stay on the stage thanks to various issues. How can a guy with this story and this level of play only get 1 full year of action? Fissure not being meant to be is a tragedy that we'll never forget. And of course, at number 1, we have the entry y'all have been waiting for. It's the big boss himself, Pine. Pine was the definition of lightning in a bottle. He came in during the inaugural season and became one of the league's most popular players seemingly overnight. There are people to this day who argue he was the best player in the world back then, and understandably so. Pine lit up the world of professional Overwatch with inhuman mechanics and individual pop-offs. There were times where the enemy team stood no chance because he was literally hitting every single shot. The wacky angles and the big flanks plus the deadly accuracy made him one of the league's most dangerous players when he was on. He absolutely ruined some of the all-time greats. He really was that kind of guy. His legendary Widowmaker and Cassidy literally put the Overwatch League on the map during Stage 1. People from far and wide would watch these highlights and would get interested in watching the league and paying attention from that point forward. He literally made people become fans of this league. He's honestly not even the greatest player skill-wise on this list. It's the fact that he established such a culture and generated so much hype that really does him in for this #1 spot. People literally couldn't stop talking about Pine. Every other week, he was doing something that blew your mind. Fans and commentators alike refer to him as the big boss because honestly, he really did feel like the final boss of the NYXL. Pine did not start every single map. There was a rotation to uphold with SBB and Libero, but whenever he did play, it felt like the NYXL were unleashing their full power. This man literally owned Ilios. His Widow and Cass absolutely ruined people. Some of the most famous plays in League history that are still talked about and greatly appreciated to this day came on this map with Pine playing. But sometimes good things aren't meant to last, because after the 2018 playoffs and the magnificent start to his career, Pine would never take the stage in a meaningful regular season game ever again. GOATS just wasn't the comp for him back then. Pine wasn't practicing at all in 2019, and he was truly burnt out from his words. And by the time 2019 came to an end, Pine was out of the league. He tried to make his comeback with the Dallas Fuel in 2021, but never got the chance to play. And now Pine is officially done with Overwatch for good, and we can only wonder what could have been for the big boss because of it. It felt like there was supposed to be more to his story. Between his skill, the memories, and the large fan base he grew, Pine did more for this game than most players ever could dream of, hence why he has to take a spot on this list and why I think he's #1. To do so much in like 30-something games, then vanish just like that is some absolutely wild stuff. But with that said, that's gonna do it. Those are 10 of the greatest one-season wonders in Overwatch League history. It's really sad that guys of this skill level couldn't find more success. It almost feels wrong in a way. Let me know what you think about this list and some of the other one-season wonders out there down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video and you want more content just like this, be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel if you're new. And until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.